Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Today we're going to be doing a quilting play-by-play for Singularity. This is one of our Stashin with Stephanie quilts that is fat quarter friendly, so you can really bust your stash on it. And this one provides a lot of negative space, so we can really have some fun with it. And I did. So I'm going to show you how I did that and really created a nice organic swirl in there by doing the echoed swirls, and then created a nice juxtaposition in my fat quarter half square triangles by doing a lot of straight line quilting in there. The fabric is really busy, so there's not really a whole lot of point to doing anything too fancy in it because you just aren't going to see it. You're going to see the texture of it when it's washed and crinkled and snuggling with it. But I always like to have something a little different. So that way, you know, if we've got something really swoopy in one area, we could have some stark lines in another. So I really had fun with this one. It didn't take an inordinate amount of time. I've definitely done ones that took much longer than that. But this one was really a lot of fun to do and really was a nice and easy stitch to do this background filler with. I think sometimes we think if we have this much space, we have to do something super fancy. And this is not that, but it looks absolutely fantastic and I love it. And we're going to show you how I did it next. Now, if you haven't heard of Stashin with Stephanie, it's our subscription club where you can get 10 fat quarters each month mailed to you of one of the latest modern quilting collections. And you can take a look at the page to see some of the recent ones that we've sent out. We try to do something a little different each month, and we really go through a lot of the different fabric manufacturers. So you're always getting something a little different to add to your stash or to make as a gift for somebody else. And it's really fun to do. And then I come up with a pattern that's been inspired by the fabric that you guys can follow along with, or you can use any of our other Stashin with Stephanie patterns to go with it as well. You never have to do the one that we designed to go with it. But here's what you get when you join. When you sign up, we're going to send you a coupon code to pick any 12 of our Stashin with Stephanie patterns for free. Then each month after that, until you've been a member for 6 months, you're going to get a coupon to download 2 more Stashin with Stephanie patterns. So that way you can get the brand new one, plus another one that you weren't able to get for your initial 12 download. Once you've been a member for 6 months, you get access to every single Stashin with Stephanie pattern for free. So we just want to reward people who've been a member for a really long time by being able to access that. It's more than a $400 value at this point for how many patterns that we have available. So it's definitely worth keeping on and being a member. And also, not only are you going to get that $40 value fat quarter bundle for $32.49, but you also are going to get 20% off any additional fabric that you order to go with it. So what we do, 10 fat quarters is not enough to make a quilt unless you're making a very small quilt. So what we do is we come up with what's called a finishing kit. It includes your background fabric and your binding and any of the fat quarters that you did not receive in your bundle. And that is going to get sent out to you if you choose to order it for 20% off. You never have to get it, but if you want to basically add your finishing kit to your bundle, then that makes a full quilt kit altogether. So that's a really good bonus. You also can, get whatever you want. We usually have remnants available. We have yardage available. You can get backing fabric if that's what you want. And all of that of the Stashin with Stephanie fabric is going to be 20% off. We also have 30% off my fat quarter books, fat quarter patchwork quilts, and fat quarter workshop. Those are great. They each have 12 fat quarter friendly patterns in them. Most of them are multi-size, so you can make them in different sizes depending on what your needs are for that quilt. So lots of goodies when you join, and you can definitely check all that out over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. Now, normally we release these videos at the end of the month, but things got a little nuts this month. And so we're putting it in the beginning of the month. So if you join today, your first bundle is not going to ship until around the 20th of June. That is because we take everything that has come in from the previous month, so in this case, last April, and then we make those bundles to order. And that takes about 3 weeks because we have more than 600 members at this point. And so we take all of those, we get them shipped out, And then, you know, we do it again the next month, because what we do when we release the pattern, that's when everyone gets a chance to get additional yardage. And there are times when we will sell out of prints. So we want to make sure that everyone gets the same chance at getting that, and that means we have to release it all at the same time to all of our members. So just keep an eye on that. But if you join today and you just, you know, you cannot wait until June, late June, to get your first bundle, you can always get this kit while supplies last, or we sometimes have kits available from previous Stash with Stephanie quilts, like the ones you see behind me. So you can check that out as well. Your discount will apply as long as you do it on your second checkout after you have become a member. All right, let's get into the quilting play-by-play. So whenever I'm choosing to do 2 different color threads, which I did in this case, I am always trying to do the biggest amount of real estate first. And in this case, it really was the background. Actually, I think it was kind of even-ish, but I wanted to get that background quilted first, so that way I could get that really nice and secure, get my quilt good and square, and then we're good to go. I was playing some thread chicken with this one. So normally I would outline along the edge of everything and then do my 1/4 inch in. But for this one, I just did the 1/4 inch in, and it was the right choice because I just barely had enough thread to do the entire quilt. But what you see me do here is I'm using my slim ruler by Angela Walters, and I'm just lining it up exactly even with the edge of my fat 1/4 area, and that is going to allow me to quilt exactly a 1/4 inch away from that, because when you're using a ruler foot, your needle at the center is exactly a 1/4 inch away. Then I'm just going to go in and I'm going to do my swirl like I always do, and then I'm going to echo that, and I'm going to travel along that line that I stitched. It's by doing that line, it kind of does 2 things. One, it helps create some really fun texture for your quilt because you're not going right up to the edge. And also it gives you an area to travel on and kind of like a buffer. So that way, if you accidentally go over a little bit, you're not getting white thread in your really bold fabric. You are getting white thread in white fabric, and it hides it a lot better when you have those little sins. So you can see I finished my swirl, and then I'm echoing around. I'm traveling on that. And then you kind of have to decide how many of these do I want to do to fill in this space. So in that case, I did quite a few because I wanted to kind of fill in underneath. That area wouldn't have worked very well. So at this point, we're going to do again, we've got our swirl, and then we're going to start our echoes. And you always just want to travel along either the outer curve, or you are going to travel along that straight line. And in this case, I've got my straight line. I'm going to travel out on that a little bit, or actually back, because I want to fill in just that little tiny bit there. And whenever I want it to be straight for more than like a 1/4 inch, I do pull out that ruler in order to help me with that. I can do it for a little bit, but not a long ways. All right, so here we are. We're going to start another swirl, and then we're going to echo along the outside of that curve, and we're going to come out, and I'm just going about a 1/4 inch in between, and that's really kind of easy to eyeball because of the width of that 1/4 inch foot, or that ruler foot. Now, how many ones you go out is totally a personal preference, and I definitely changed this as I was going around. That one I only echoed 1 time because what I was trying to do was kind of move down to fill out the rest of that block, because I want it to be able to come out and look kind of normal. So here I could do echoes, or I could do a teeny tiny little swirl, which is what I ended up doing. What ultimately you want to do is try and create an even texture. So that way it doesn't look like there's big gaps, or that you went like super small in one area and big in another. So you can see I did 1 around, and then I'm using that ruler to help me transfer. And I gave another little edge there, and then I'm gonna pop in and do another swirl. And so it filled it in okay. I probably could have done a little bit more there. In this case, you're gonna see me, I think, go over, yep, I'm going over 2 of those swirls in order to make it look like it is echoing the way I want. So it's really kind of up to you how many echoes you want to do, depending on what type of texture you're looking for and how you want to move across the quilt. So here, you know, there was just 1 because I need to, or no, we are going to do 2. and we're gonna fill up this other corner. And then after that, I need to choose how many echoes I do based on where I need to end at the end so that I can fill things in. As you can see, I need to fill in kind of that little corner. So we're gonna use the ruler so that I can keep that line nice and straight and come in. And then we're going to use the ruler again to get back to the edge, and then I have to fill in that whole top corner. And so that is going to determine where you're going to be, because obviously if you echo one time, you're going to end up on one side of the swirl, and if you echo again, you can make yourself over to the other. And so you kind of have to decide, where do I want to end up from there? So here you can see that I've echoed one time, I'm on the left, and I'm going to echo again, and that's going to take me back to the right. And now I have a problem because I have a random spot over there that really needs to be filled in. So I really need to echo back and get back over there somehow. And that's going to involve some traveling as well. So here we're just going to do, it ends up looking like a lot of echoes because it's easier to kind of fill it in that case with the echo than doing another small swirl, although that's always an option. So here we're at the very end, and I'm choosing to just echo all the way to the edge. So that ends up looking like a giant echo there because it's going all the way out. So there's lots of different options for how you can fill in that space. We're going to go ahead and watch this one on 2x speed, and I am not going to talk through it. We're just going to watch the music. And because each one's a little different, and you have to kind of make the decisions in the moment, but know that there really isn't a right or wrong. You can echo as few or as many times as you want, as long as you are keeping it somewhat consistent in how you're making your quilting decisions. All right, so now we're working on the really big square, and this is the one where I really had to watch my scale, because it's really easy when you have a very large space to fill in to end up getting a little bit bigger as you're quilting. So I was really very conscious of making sure I wasn't going too crazy with making my swirls really big. And by the way, if you need some help with swirls, it's an entire section of our Intro to Free Motion Quilting series. You can watch that for free. And you can get some ideas on how to do swirls and also practice with some stencils to get that motion down. And so you can see here, I'm really trying to keep it kind of tight, about the same tightness as when I was working in those smaller areas. So that way when you're looking at the quilt as a whole, like on the bed or couch or whatever, it looks like the texture and is similar when you're going from here to here, that it's not like you've quilted it in two completely different densities, because you want it to appear to be about the same. So as a rule of thumb, I was kind of going to maybe 3 times around to try to fill that in. And you can always kind of, a lot of times I found myself like filling in like 1/2 and then kind of working my way up and then back over, because it is very easy when you're working on this to kind of just end up always on the same side. You can see here I've kind of always ended up on the right there. That one ended up with kind of a lot of echoes because I kind of just needed to fill in that space without needing to do yet another swirl. So now we're going to do this here, and you can see it's just really easy to end up like always on the right or always on the left, depending on how many echoes it is that you are doing. And so it's really, I think, almost like hard to always bounce from one side to the other. I think it's easier to kind of fill in a space on one side and then go over. Like I had to consciously think I'm going to end on the left side this time so I can fill in more of that center of this big wide open area. So that's kind of how I did it, is I kind of just kind of worked my way around, and you kind of can almost see that as it goes around if you kind of follow the echoes. But it really is a fun stitch. I love the way that this turned out. It looks super fancy, but you can see it's a really basic stitch. Like the swirl is a super basic stitch to do, and then you're just echoing around it. And it just makes it look a little fancier, and it fills in the space really nicely, and it doesn't take a ton of time. So we're gonna watch the rest of this on fast forward as well, so you guys can see how I worked my way around, because a lot of free motion quilting, when you're not doing it with a stencil, is learning how to work around the block so that you don't kind of quilt yourself into a corner. So that's why having things like this echo, straight line going around that I can travel on is really nice, and learning how to quilt on top and travel on top of stitch lines that you've already done, that's also really nice and a good skill to have as you're working with these things. And then also in this case, like deciding, okay, I'm going to do a teeny little swirl there as opposed to echo some more. So let's just watch this as I finish up my background filler. All right, there's one thing that I want to show you here in the middle of just doing background filler, and that's how I echoed this. So I quilt on an APQS Lenny. It doesn't have a huge throat space, but it's perfect for me because I'm short, my wingspan is not very large, so I really can only quilt to about here, and that's all I have control over anyway. So it doesn't work for me to have a giant machine. I wouldn't be very good quilting way out here because I can't reach. So there have been maybe 3 quilts in the 5 or so years that I've had the Lenny where I would have wished I had like 2 more inches of throat space to work with. This was one of them. So what I did was I started right about here, and then I quilted all the way up and around. And you're gonna see me kind of get back to where I can't go any further here in just a second. And then what I did is I walked over to the side of my long arm. I like turned everything off, had my needle down so that everything would stay in place. And I walked over to the side of my long arm, and I physically advanced it by the 2 inches I needed so that way I could finish quilting that bottom. So this is where you can see I've stopped with my needle down. I'm going to physically adjust the leaders on my long arm so that way I can access that bottom part. And I'm going to finish quilting that start or that outline there and just kind of match up with where I started. And then I can start my swirls. And then at the end, I'm obviously not going to be able to get to this top part, so I'll quilt as far as I can to about up here or so, and then again I'm going to stop and pull it, roll it back so that way I can reach this section and have it look like everything is good to go. The key to that is to make sure that you turn your machine off with the needle down, because then you're able to move it, and when you get started back up again, you don't have a weird little, you know, jiggle or something where things didn't turn out quite right. Because here it all looks very smooth, and that wouldn't necessarily be the case if I would have completely broken my threads and gone from there. So that's just a nice little trick if the area you're trying to cover is just a little bit too deep for what your throat space will allow on your long arm. All right, so now you can see that I'm unrolling. So this is like the opposite end of what I showed you earlier, where we're going to, I've quilted up as far as I can go, and then I unrolled it so that way I can reach the top of that area, and then I'm just gonna fill in the rest of that accordingly. And you wanna make sure you're leaving, like you don't wanna just leave like this top too, because that might look a little weird when everything is said and done. So if like here I left like almost the entire top quadrant to fill in, so that way it looks more organic and not like it's flat, because you don't want it to look like this is not a flat design. You don't want it to look like a flat design to where I've like quilted up to here because I can't get any further. You know, it's much nicer to just kind of stop here and then fill in this whole area. It looks more like I was able to do it all in one shot. All right, so now I am moving on to those task square triangles from the fat quarters. Now I have definitely switched out a bunch of threads before. I did not want to do that in this case. So I pulled up my Magic Mint color 30317 from Glide, and that did a really great job of blending. These teals can really be a great neutral. So can green, and those are ones that I often will go to when I have a lot of color like this in a quilt. And in some instances you do see it quite a bit, like when I'm on these pinks, but in all of these greens and blues, which is the majority of the colors, it just kind of blends away and just adds texture. Now we're gonna go really in depth on how to outline, quilt, task square triangles, and then also create this texture in our Intro to Rulerwork course that is coming up. You can check out our video on a preview of some of the supplies you need and what we're going to be doing in the video description down below, and we'll pop it in the eye above as well. But we're doing that for both the long arm and the domestic sewing machine. But this is kind of a little preview here. So the first thing I really like to do is outline every single one of those. Now I pressed every single one of these seams open. I find that that really makes it a lot easier to outline those. This is kind of like a modified stitch in the ditch, because when you press your seams open, there is no ditch. What I'm doing here is I'm stitching right next to where that seam allowance is. So you're not going in it for the most part, you're going next to it. And the quilt police will tell you that you're going to break your threads doing this, and I'm here to tell you I've quilted more than 100 quilts like this and I've never had a problem, so you can ignore that advice. But the first thing I do is always outline. And in this case, since I'm using the same thread for everything, I only outline one time. Sometimes if I'm doing different thread colors for each one, like I'll switch it and I'll do an outline on each one. But for this one, I just need it to be outlined one time. So that's all we're doing there. And then what I'm doing is I am doing a triangle in the middle, because that kind of gives you a little bit extra texture and something to look at. So at this point, I've already quilted that section, but I need to travel over that. And so I'm using my ruler to make sure that I'm able to do that. And one thing that takes a little getting used to when you're doing this with task square triangles and ruler work in general is that you're always placing your ruler a 1/4 inch away from where you actually want to stitch, because the edge of that ruler foot is exactly a 1/4 inch away from the center of that needle. So that takes a little bit of getting used to. So what you're seeing me do here is I am lining up that 1 1/4 inch, which is in the middle of that ruler, with the tip of the triangle. And that's going to allow me to get about the same angle every single time I quilt over this. So you can see it happen right here. I'm quilting in, I've got that outline done, And now what I'm going to do is I'm lining up that dotted line right in the center. We'll see it as we come up a little bit with the tip of that triangle. And then once I feel like I'm just about even with my point, that's when I'm going to change directions and line that ruler up again so it's just a 1/4 inch away from wherever my point is. And that is the hardest thing to get used to, is knowing that my ruler needs to stay a 1/4 inch away from where I want my needle ultimately to end up. So that can be a little challenging. But when you go through and you use the same reference point on the ruler every single time, then it doesn't matter what angle you're going, you're always are going to have just about the same look for that triangle when you go through it. Now, I've definitely done this before where I've gone through and I've outlined everything and then I've come back and then I've done my triangles, but there's so many in this one, I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget any of my inners. So that's why I went through and made sure that everything got outlined and had my inner triangle done at the same time. And that worked out pretty well for me there, because I don't think I missed any. I could be wrong, but I think I got them all. Now, the other thing that you kind of have to do as you do this is you kind of have to learn how to work your way across the quilt. Because like I said previously, the entire block is 16 inches in there, which is about 2 inches larger than will fit on my long arm to do the entire block at one time. So basically I did a 12-inch chunk at a time. So it always was a little different as I worked my way across, but I always had a nice clear path to go through. So we'll show you what that means in just a second as we get to a point where I need to fill in accordingly. This is a nice, really big section, and it allows you to really kind of show that I'm really only going through one. So like I'm outlining one of those triangles, and then I'm just letting that serve for the one that's next to it. Because we've created the texture, we don't really need to go down both of them because we're not changing thread colors. We just want to make sure that we've got that there, and it'll also speed it up as well. All right, so we're going to do that angle and then move on to the next triangle that's part of there. And this just really, you know, some of this is experience of figuring out how you're going to work your way around the quilt. And some of it is, oh shoot, I've kind of quilted myself into a corner and now I have to, you know, travel along some previous stitching lines to get where I want to go. One other tip, if you're having a trouble figuring out where your center is, you can always take a friction gel pen and just kind of make a mark there. Do test to make sure that it goes away fine, because sometimes I will see like just a little bit of a shadow when you put it away. But most of the time I have no problems with that. All right, so here I'm kind of working my way up so that I can work on all of those half square triangles at the same time. And I was kind of just going up and down, up and down, up and down. Like I would do all of these and then come over and do all of these, and then I would be less likely to miss something as I worked my way across. And if this is the first time you've ever done this, don't worry if you think I can't go around as fast, because you definitely can. So that was an example right there of me traveling. I needed to get back up to that point so that I could do my textured line in the middle and not have as much backtracking later, because I had already done that entire bottom triangle and the top triangle, and so this was just the best way. So I'd done, you know, the 3 stacked in a row, and now we're moving on to like a section like this. So I'm going through, I'm going to hit this top part first. It's not this block exactly, but that's pretty much how it's working. We're going to hit the top block first, because then I can work my way down and then over. And that way I don't have to have as much backtracking as I work my way around. So we're just going down in that center. We're going to line up that dotted line with our corner. Stop when we're about even with the corner, readjust, and quilt into the corner. And this one needs to be outlined still, so we're going to outline the top. Now I've already done going down because we've already quilted this entire ruler, so that's why you're going to then go back and just travel over the line you just stitched, line up your dotted line, and come down. So now that top one is completely done. Now remember, we've already done this line here. So we can just go ahead and start quilting to outline our triangles without having to do that center line because that's already completed for us. All right, so we're going up. Now at this point, I could travel back down or I could travel to the side. Either way, I'm going over a previous stitching line, so that is just your preference on how you want to do that. And so now we're going to do our textured line. And now I've got one more outline to do in order to complete this. I've already done the one in the center and the one on the side, so we just really have to hit the bottom. And again, we've got a choice. We can either quilt over the line I just quilted, or I can go up the other one. It is really up to you. All right, so we're going to come in here and out. And it's just a lot of this. It's just a lot of going back and forth and thinking, what have I quilted already? What do I still need to quilt? And how can I do this as efficiently as possible? So we've already got that side quilted, so we just have to go up through that center. That's going pretty good. And then we've got this last little bit to fill in. One thing I probably should also tell you guys, so what I do is I quilt all the way from top to bottom with the background thread. And then what I do is I start from the bottom and work my way back up when I'm doing my second thread. And then I'll just keep repeating that process, going up and down until I've gotten through all the threads I want to use. In this case, I just used 2 threads. So I had to go all the way down and then all the way back up, and we're good to go. All right, here's where that transfer gets to be important. So we're getting into a section where, you know, I've got fewer of those Haskell triangles, and I need to be able to travel and connect everything without making it too difficult on myself. So first we're going to handle this. And in this case, so I don't forget about it, that I have to do it, you can see that there's no way for me to continue on at this point because it just moves straight into a big background chunk. So I want to make sure that I get this entire section quilted, and then I'm able to make my way over on the top. And so some of this, again, is trial and error, and some of it you kind of have to go through and be like, oh shoot, I kind of quilted myself into a corner. Now I have to travel on a bunch of stitches to get myself out. And that's fine if that happens. Like if you realize, oh shoot, I forgot that tiny little triangle that I just did. You can quilt over your previous quilting lines to get to it and get it done. That's no problem. The goal though is to make sure, like in this case, I was quilting 3 at a time, like these 3 at a time. I want to make sure that I get all of those done so that way when I advance the quilt, I don't have to then go back and get something that I missed, because that's when you are going to miss stuff and you'll have like an entire Haskell triangle or chunk of Haskell triangles that gets left out. All right, so now I'm going back, I'm kind of filling things in. So that's kind of when I deviate from that whole like up, down, is when I have a little thing sticking out like this. Like I wouldn't be able to go on here if like this was my bottom piece. So I would have to do this, and then I can come back, and then I can come up and over the rest of the way, which is what you're going to see me do next. So I think I'm going to stop talking, and we're just going to fast forward through this so you can see as I work my way around that quilt and how I work it so that way I don't have too much backtracking in order to make everything work. All right, well, that is the quilting for Singularity. Like I said, the pattern is available on our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. We also will have kits while supplies last. And if you like this, you can definitely go check out Stashin with Stephanie. If you join, then you get all the goodies. You get the 12 patterns when you join for free, PDF patterns. You get 2 patterns a month every month after that until you've been a member for 6 months, and then you get access to every Stashin with Stephanie pattern that we have available on our website, which is more than a $400 value, so it pays to stick around for a little bit. And then also you get 30% off my 2 fat quarter friendly books, and you get 20% off additional fabric that coordinates with it. So if you want to turn your bundle into a full quilt kit, we have what we call finishing kits, which contain the background, the binding, and the fat quarters you didn't receive. So that way you can make that into a full quilt kit. Or if you have something else in mind, you can get additional fabric for that, or just to have in your stash. So lots of really great deals, a great way to quilt on a budget, a great way to bust your stash too, because you have access to all of those patterns, which is really fun. And then also, we do these videos where we show you how to make the quilt and give you some ideas for quilting it. And I think I really like this one. Like, it was not a really hard quilting one, and it didn't take a ton of time, but I really love creating that background texture that juxtaposes with the stark lines of the half square triangles, and I really like how this one turned out. All right, go check out all the things over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, and until next time, happy quilting.